This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoop. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
I'm Brad Davy, and I'm filling in for Gene Krebs today. Here on High Ohio, we're talking to people around the state who know how things work. Today I'm joined by Dr. Barbara O'Brien, the National Policy Director for grade level reading. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the campaign?
So the campaign is an effort to mobilize communities to work with school districts to increase the number of third graders who are reading at grade level. Right now, we know that about 80% of low-income third graders don't read at grade level, and they're 6 times more likely to drop out of high school than their peers who can read. So it's really an urgent education experience. And I come to this because I've been a child advocate in the nonprofit world. I was Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, and I've had a chance to see the impact on our economy and kids' lives and the likelihood of incarceration, and it all comes out of whether kids succeed in school or fail in school. And third grade is one of those points that can tip it either way.
So the national conversation around education policy has focused on STEM. Why is it so important to broaden that conversation and start to double down on reading as an educational lens?
So reading is the basis of everything. So when you think back to when you went to school, what kind of math did you have? You had word problems.
Right.
So even mathematics, science, everything has to do with being able to read. But we've also learned that math is its own language. So I don't want to sound as if reading is just everything. There's its own logic and grammar to mathematics. But the way into that is being able to read workbooks and textbooks and word problems. So STEM is hugely important, but STEM education won't work if kids are illiterate. You've got to have that foundational skill of reading.
So changing gears a little bit, education outcomes, not just here in Ohio, but across the country, are marked by disparities, whether it's race,
Right,
or income, and a host of other socioeconomic factors. Can doubling down on third grade reading and reading policies across the country, can they sort of remediate and start filling some of those gaps and disparities across community?
So it's the American dream that education in schools will somehow level the playing field between different socioeconomic incomes. But the reality is that right now, family income dictates a child's success in school. So I think having a focus on more kids reading at third grade means that you also have to deal with the effects of poverty in the life of a child. And that's why the campaign is working on a comprehensive set of strategies that have to do with parent training and nutrition and safety and involvement in summer programs. So a whole variety of strategies that make sure kids get the places in their lives where they need time to learn how to learn, even if it's not in school, and the safety to feel they can sit and read a book somewhere and have it be quiet so they can concentrate. So we actually have a wide array of strategies that we are pushing on. But today here in Cleveland, what I really wanted to focus on was how important it is to make sure kids get to school almost every day so they are learning. And Cleveland actually has a bad student attendance record. It's something that Cleveland needs to work on.
So sort of switching gears, since we're talking local now, we've enacted the third grade reading guarantee here in the state, and it's gotten a lot of attention lately, particularly around its retention policy. That is, that if students aren't reading at grade level by the time they finish their third grade year, that they're held back. Could you talk a little bit about retention policy? Is it something that is successful? And when it is successful, what other services must be coupled with it to make sure that stuff is coalesces?
So third grade retention policies have been one of those be careful what you wish for developments, because when we started pushing on more kids reading at grade level, we never thought that it would lead to laws saying then kids can't go forward. Right. But I think what that says is that people really understand how important it is, and they wanted to do something about it, and they wanted some accountability. The challenge is, what do you do when you're looking at 8-year-olds? That's how old third graders are. And are they accountable for the fact they haven't learned to read?
Where does that burden
Where
lie?
does that burden lie? But it's a reality in about 34 states that there's retention laws now on the books. So our perspective is, let's take that to create a greater sense of urgency in the community, that the community has to do its part so fewer kids even get to that point. So we think the schools ought to be held accountable. If they have children who can't read at third grade, why weren't they working on this when they were in second grade? Or why weren't they working on it when they were in first grade? Why does everyone wait till it's almost too late and then drop a hammer? So we think policies that say you diagnose every child's reading abilities in kindergarten and first grade. You find out which children are not on track to be proficient by the end of third grade. You customize the tutoring and special services they're going to get. Turns out reading is really complicated, and kids don't read for all sorts of different reasons. You find out why each child isn't reading. In Colorado, you're mandated to have an individual reading plan for every single child, and then you involve the parents and the community and the schools in getting them back on track to being proficient and at grade level by the end of third grade.
It's important to note, right?
Yeah.
So we're not just third grade reading policy and grade level reading policy isn't just retention policy. They're
Right.
two very separate things.
Right.
And there are other things that we can start to look at. So looking at other communities, you've worked across the country. What type of things do you see Cleveland to have an opportunity to do that maybe other places have already done, and that maybe sister cities or places that look and feel just like us can do to sort of help, fix our problem here locally?
So I think the main first thing for Cleveland is this issue of so many kids not attending school. I heard from some people in Cleveland that there are some elementary schools that have a 50% absenteeism rate. Those children aren't learning. They're not in school. So we looked at Kansas City, Missouri, which decided to tackle the same problem, and found out by working with their school district which children had the worst attendance rates, what schools they came from, tried to understand what was happening in home life, because somebody has to get the children to school, and figured out a strategy for every one of the kids that had the worst attendance rates. So 467 children in 4 elementary schools, in most likely to fail, most in need of special help. And they have formed a coalition that's going to work on transportation and addressing asthma issues in some of the kids, and getting the parents to understand how important it is to get themselves together and get the kids to school. So just a customized strategy in the number of kids, and they have the ability to measure their impact because it'll come from reading scores.
Thank you. So if you work on a national level, right? If there was one thing that you can get legislators to do, one policy initiative that they can implement, what would it be?
I'm going to jump way outside of what our conversation has been around.
Okay.
I would require teacher prep programs to have more student-teacher time for their brand new teachers and more careful placement with a master teacher. I've been doing an informal survey of elementary school principals, and the vast majority say their brand new teachers not only don't know how to teach reading, don't know how to get kids caught up who are behind, because they're learning theory when they're in school, and then they get into a classroom and all of a sudden, they've had a little bit of student teaching. Right. I would change the way we train teachers so that they know how to get kids caught up.
That's very interesting. Well, what is one thing that is keeping you up at night when we talk about education policy? What is the one thing that drives you to do this work?
That we've somehow lost a belief in the common good, and that working together to solve common issues is now politically so divisive, and we have parties fighting over stay out of my life or be more. I think we've lost this national sense of purpose that makes us understand what's really important, and that educating kids well is one of those things that ought to be a national priority. And yet all we either talk about is schools need more money or they need less money, but nobody's talking about what are we getting for the money we're spending and how do we make sure that our dreams for our country are reflected in how we expect our schools to perform and how we fund them to perform.
It seems like you're proposing a new value proposition, if I will, right? That we need to start looking at our kids holistically
Yes.
and as a part of our understanding about what the American dream
And
is,
that
how to
we're
achieve
all
it.
responsible for how the next generation comes along.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we hope you enjoy your stay in Cleveland.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.